Yeah, I mean, I've definitely heard, even like you said, perceivers in general, ENTPs. I've heard them say that a lot. Like they're really good at, they have trouble finishing things given a particular little time frame, but they're really good at getting so many different things done in their own way. And you said all kinds of things in there that's got me thinking about a lot of stuff. And that bozo's gonna hate it. Well, he doesn't hate the cognitive functions, but he hates for me to say that's an SE thing or a TI thing. I always think about that now because you said so many things in there that made me think, oh, I see all these function things working. Um, so maybe I'm wrong. This is just my thought process as you said a lot of things. The first thing is I think maybe one reason why you might be having trouble seeing how well you adapt as much is because you have auxiliary SE, and I'm thinking like an ESP, they that might be a little more profound for them. Whereas for you, your TI might be the way that you can really see your own strengths at the easiest way. And it was really interesting because your type ISTPs are the type out of the 16 I know the least about. So I know you just found out your type a few months ago, but I'm hoping you can give me some really good insights here. And a couple of things you said did. Because I thought it was interesting when you talked about how you were setting up the things for the chat. Now, not only were you adaptable, but to me, that's like a very quote unquote T situation. It was like a logical, structured set of things, like a task to be done. And I could see how, for you, that adaptability would play out in a way that might be different than an ISFP. Um, that was just something I thought when you said that because I always picture that when I think of ISTPs, I think of them being um, is using their TI to be really good at analyzing things in detail, and then I guess it's SE allowing you to adapt it as you need to go along. Like to start, kind of like you were saying, like starting off with things that you know are true, and then changing it as you need to. Um, and then finally, the last thing you said, and I'll let you go for this. I feel bad now, but
That's
I,
okay.
I think it was interesting how you talked about how uh, J's are very efficient, and I think that's down to JE, either FE or TE, because we use that first. That's a process that I think wants to get things done quickly. Whereas TI and FI, I think, are going to take more time to analyze things a while first. And
Uh,
I always think that may be part of the reason why perceiving types do what you said, how they want to do different things as they go along, because they're still kind of working through things in terms of either the logical structure of something or even with their personal values.
well, I think what it comes down to is just um, like where are those first two functions? And the idea that the judgment function is introverted means you're just kind of internally making these decisions,
Yeah.
whereas the perceiving function is extroverted. So it's basically gathering information from the outside world. So that's kind of what defines the P type.
Yeah.
So the P type is known for basically wanting to gather as much information as they possibly can before making a decision. And the reason the P's are kind of known for procrastinating is because they feel like they haven't gathered enough information.
Yeah. Yeah. That is. I think that sounds exactly right.
Yeah. So whether they're a sensor or an intuitor, they're gathering sensory data, what's in the here and now, or any gathering possibilities in their mind. Those are just things that that the perceiving type is doing. They're just gathering all this information and and just making a decision only when they have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like the TI, my TI would be analyzing it. The FI would be comparing against their own personal values. Um, but that's the what you're saying about the ISTP being able to adapt. I think the ISTP in particular is known for that because I'm using TI to analyze the sensory data coming in through my SE, and I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's one of the other ISFPs, like Hornet or somebody else might be able to give a perspective on the ISFP, like how FI works to if they're just as good at adapting, or if maybe it goes against their own personal values. I'm not sure, but
Mm.
like for me TI is like it's just like strictly logical, completely independent of my own personal feelings. So like I'll just adapt to whatever I see happening in the moment. So I think that's why ISTPs kind of have that, are kind of known for that ability. And and it might be a stereotype. I'm sure there's ISTPs who struggle with that. Just like other ISTPs. I think ISTPs have like some of the worst descriptions online, just because they seem to be defined by stereotypes that aren't
Yeah.
true of all ISTPs. Like I've mentioned, like I'm not an athletic type. Like a lot of ISTPs are known for. I'm not into sports. ISTPs are kind of known for being into like extreme sports.
Oh yeah.
They like to go skydiving and bungee jumping, all these risky activities, and I'm totally not into that. And I I don't I suck at pretty much any sport known to man.
Well, I do too. So
But
I'm not in any better shape than you are.
yeah, but yeah, I mean I mentioned before I use my SE in other ways, and
Yeah.
but but yeah, that's kind of made it kind of hard to identify myself as an ISTP.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I can see that.
and so I guess that's kind of another reason why always been mistyped. I think I would have embraced the INTP description before ISTP, but truth is I don't relate to any at all.
Yeah, look, that's something actually I really wanted to ask you about this because it's like I said, ISTPs are still a type that I really know the least amount about. But what's funny is on the flip side, I feel like INTPs I know extremely well.
Mm.
My best friend is an INTP. I have a couple other friends that have tested as INTP. I have some online friends that are INTP. I've talked to INTPs on the forum. I feel like I get them really well, and yet I don't get ISTPs well just because I haven't had any experiences with them. So I don't know how well you know INTPs, but that's something I really wanted to ask you. What would you say, like, what are the main differences that you would say distinguish yourself between you and an INTP?
It's hard to tell on the surface because we both use TI as our dominant function. The INTP, um, let's see. I can't help but think of this in terms of cognitive functions again,
Yeah, yeah,
because it's like, well, that is the primary difference, with the NE versus SE.
yeah.
Um, but the INTPs, see, that's the thing. I don't really know any INTPs in real life, and the ones I've seen, I know there's been at least one INTP in one of these interactions. I know Numis have talked with an INTP guy, at least
Yeah,
one, and I remember I related to that guy actually,
yeah,
but but again, I was relating more to his TI and his analytical mindset, and not so much his perceiving function. Um, just the idea, but mainly, so INTPs are known to theorize a lot,
yeah,
and the thing is, I do that too, but not so much with real life situations. Like I'll theorize on like issues that don't really matter. Um, like if I'm watching a TV show, like like Lost or Fringe or one of these mystery TV shows where it's like a series, like something you're trying to figure stuff out. Like I'll theorize on that only because it's meant to be theorized. But I won't theorize on stuff like I won't try to imagine possibilities if it pertains to like I have to make a decision about a job, like or decided to take this job or another job. Uh, um, hmm.
Actually, I think I can kind of see what you're saying because it's funny when you first said that I was interpreting it in a different way. I was like, wait a second, this is the exact opposite of what I thought it was going to be. But when you described it, it actually sounded right to me because here's something that I've read and heard, and I know this is generalizing a little bit too much, but I think it's generally true, which is I think N's, both NE and NI users, do tend to think about the future. That's like their kind of
Okay.
basic mindset. They're always thinking about future possibilities. How can things change? How can I make this thing better? And I've read that SI focuses more on the past and how the past will link you to the present, and how SE focuses mostly on the present. It focuses about all the sensory things that are happening in the moment. So to me, what you said there kind of makes sense in the aspect that you were saying how, like, if you're watching a TV show that has a particular plot, your mind is gonna be focusing on all those different little things that are happening at that one particular moment. Whereas you wouldn't use it as much as you were talking about, like for like a future job interview, because you wouldn't be thinking about, well, what's going to be happening all that far in the future. Not to say that an SE user would never think about the future or never think about the past, or everybody thinks about all three, but maybe it wouldn't be an SE user's prime uh, first instinct to focus on. I don't know.
Yeah. Actually, that now that I think about it, it does make sense because like a TV show is scripted. It's already been written. Even though I, as a viewer, haven't seen the outcome yet, I know that there is an outcome, and I
Yeah.
know that that the answer is going to be revealed. Whereas real life isn't like that. We don't know what's going to happen in the
Right.
future, and so I don't see it as something that that should be theorized, in such depth that that I would lose myself in the theorizing about all the different possible futures that can happen. I would rather just focus on what I already know. So I think that's I guess that would be the difference between me and an INTP. Um, INTPs, well, and the other thing about NE is like NE is good at coming in and just generating ideas out of nowhere. So like an INTP, the reason INTPs commonly are found in like software development, which is my field, is that software design requires new ideas and innovations.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the TI plus NE comes in really handy
Yeah.
because they're coming up with the ideas on how to create this new feature in like the next version of Microsoft Windows, or how to improve things that like you notice like every like Microsoft product, any like every version of Windows or every version of Office, it comes with these new features that you probably had never had like a desire to have.
Yeah.
And it annoys a lot of people, but the reason is like they come up with these innovations based on what they perceive the customer will want to use, even if the customer doesn't know that this feature will really come in handy. And that's totally NE. Like these are
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
never put a thought of. Whereas I, as me using TI plus SE, I still have the ability to analyze and solve problems, and I have like these programming skills. But I would rather use it to solve known problems, fix bugs,
Yeah. Okay. That's
and
okay.
work on day-to-day issues that come up. Whether the test team finds oh, this feature doesn't work right. Just problems that are known to exist, and that's actually the kind of job that I've been looking for. And in fact, I'll actually be starting a new job in a little over a week, where I'll be doing just that. Solving compilation issues, and just constant problems that are known to be that the team knows already exist. As opposed to designing new features in the software, because that's you know before, where I was a software developer, I struggled with it because even though I was good at programming, I just couldn't get into the design aspect when I was writing code that wasn't really solving any problems. It was more designing features, and so
Yeah.
I just really struggled to be passionate about it, and my work suffered for it, and so I just decided I just had to get out of there and go look for something else.
Oh, I'm really glad you mentioned that. That's actually a good bit enlightening to me because it somewhat verifies a theory that I've had, which I'm not sure if I'm right, but it's, you always hear from the intuitives on the site that they're bad at details. They're bad at looking at all the little details of a situation. And I definitely know that as an SI user, I'm really good at that. I am really good at recognizing the details of a situation and seeing what's not right and fixing it. And I've always wondered for SPs if they do that too. If that's one thing where the S's get lumped together, how true that is.
I think
And
it is. Yeah.
I've always read I think the title on the site for ISTPs are the mechanics, and And what no, it's really what you described really almost to me lined up very much with that title. That I always when I picture that, I picture an ISTP like being a really good mechanic, like being somebody that could take like an engine and see all the little things that need to be fixed on, or see all the little things that need to be built or put into place. Which again was something that as an SI user to a degree I could relate to. Now, since my TI isn't that good, I wouldn't be very good at dealing with an engine at all. I don't know anything about it. But but it's interesting when you said that, even though you were looking at it from a different situation involving software, what you said was I thought that made so much sense. How you want to take something that's there already and fix all the little things and get everything set straight, but you would have more trouble coming up with new ideas. Because that's something I really relate to a lot. Because I mean, with my NE being inferior, that's I don't want to say that SI users can't be creative because we can be, but I'm like you. I have a very hard time coming up with something completely new. I'm a lot better at adding on to something that's already there.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly what it is. I didn't relate to the mechanic aspect of an ISTP. Like I'm not good at fixing cars, but I think that's only because I haven't been taught. Like I haven't like taken any auto mechanics beyond high school. So like I pop the hood of my own car and I just see this jumble of just devices. I don't know what most of them are because nowadays when they make cars they cover things up. They don't want people tinkering with but they want you to bring it into the dealership.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I guess.
So, but like if I were to open up the hood of like say like a 1950s Chevrolet something, I can go, oh yeah, that's the engine, that's a distributor, these are the spark plugs, and I can identify stuff because that's the layout of it, and that's what I've been taught. High school auto mechanics, they teach you like old school engines and how things worked when they were still inventing cars, and so you know if I had the proper training, I probably would be good at fixing cars. It's just it's just not something that I've ever pursued.
Right.
And because I've always been more interested in computers, that's where my focus has been most of my life. And so I never consider myself mechanical just because I've never worked with mechanical things. My dad is. Yeah, my dad's
Yeah.
really good.
Oh, really? Okay, cool. No, I think it's funny. I guess you can interpret that word mechanic though in some different ways. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be like on actual, physical metal engines or things like that. It could just be anything physical you could play around with and tinker around with, and you could, you know, see how it works or see what you can do with it. And I think maybe I'm wrong, but I would imagine that ISTPs would have more of a desire just to kind of mess around with things like that than I would. I don't know because SI users are funny like this. What we'll do is I've read about this in a few books, and it lines up with what most ISFJs and ISTJs say. Is that we'll find a particular hobby or interest that we have, and we'll learn so many little details and facts about it just because it makes us feel good. It makes us feel good to know all these little different things about it. But for me, that never translates into how something works. It's always information. It's always like stored details, like facts and charts and, timetables and things like that, where it's never how things piece together, how this works with this and how this interacts with that. I'm really not good at that very much. And
Okay.
I don't know, it sounds like that, maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds like that could be like an SI-TI difference.
It could be. I mean, you were saying before that the SI and the SE both have this tendency to look at lots of details and see details that other people might miss, and I think that's true. But that's really interesting about the difference where you're just gathering detailed facts just to have them. Um, and I'm trying to think back to how I was as a kid. Like I remember being fascinated by like my dad's stereo system. Like he had like he had like this. So I mean, just basically like having this the stereo receiver, a tape deck, a record player, speakers, and I would like try to figure out like how it was all wired together. Like I would ask my dad like, how does this work? How does this go? How does the music get from the tape to the speakers? And he would show me like all the how all the wires were connected, and I would take that and I would like draw these these diagrams. I mean, I've actually I've actually found like going through my closet finding all these childhood drawings that I did. I've come across like these pictures I drew of my dad's like this stereo system, and these lines are representing the wires going from each piece of equipment to the other. It's like that was the kind of thing that I was fascinated with as a kid. And the funny thing is, I didn't well, I guess I kind of yeah. So there's actually there's a lot of memories that are coming back to me right now that I'm thinking about. But like I used to take Legos and build like these pretend like electronic devices. Um, like I would just like use Legos to represent like all these the pieces of equipment. Um, and like put these Legos together and like build stuff. And it was really the really crude examples, but that I wasn't trying to go for like accurate representation. I just wanted to know how all the pieces connected. Um, but so yeah, I guess that would be an example of SE, like trying to build stuff and trying to.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to say with these things. Like, I always, when I make posts, I always preface this by saying, "Oh, it doesn't mean that all people of this do this." Like, I don't want to say, "Oh, all ISTPs like to tinker around with things." I mean, it's hard to say, but I mean, like, a lot of people could like Legos and like doing stuff like that.
Yeah,
But I do think it's interesting though, because I have heard that SPs are very like, hands-on people. They really like to have something in front of them that they can work with, that they're in general really good at doing that kind of thing. And I mean, I guess SJs could be too, but I don't know. It's hard to say because I can't speak for all SJs, of course. But I've never really been like that. I mean, I've been somewhat physical, but it's a lot more, for me, things are a lot more sequential. It's not so much how things in the present are all working together. It's more so how things from the past lead up to the present. It's like a
okay.
more firm, in place structure based on what's already happened. That's the way it kind of works for me. I'm a lot, and I think that's why, like I mentioned before, I really like collecting facts. I really like collecting a lot of different little things. I like bringing things from the past together and knowing that they're still in place. Like I like memorizing facts about certain things because I know they're not going to change. I know that that fact happened. It is always going to be there. Uh, so
Well,
it's,
I can relate to that too. I mean, I've
yeah,
always done that too, like just memorizing facts. Even if there was no practical purpose, I just enjoyed having this. And I don't know if that for me. I think that might be TI because
yeah,
I know both TI and SI tend to do that.
right. Well, and I have TI also. I don't know. I still don't know exactly how I use my TI. It's my most confusing function for me. But that may be part of it too. It may be how SI, for me at least, how SI and TI work together. I
And
don't know.
you have a good point there.
Yeah, I'd be actually interested to hear about how an ISTJ feels about that. I'd be really curious about that. I'd have to ask one.
Yeah, because the ISTJ, I would think it's more like gathering the facts and then doing something with it.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, that's interesting using the SI and TI because I've thought about the same thing with me using TI with NI
Mm.
because I'm just like taking in the details with my SC and then using the TI with NI to analyze those details and notice patterns.
Oh, that's a really good point. I didn't think about that at all. Because, see, my N function, I don't even know what I do with my N function. I know how it. Here's what I do know. I have read about how inferior NE plays out, and I relate to all that completely. But so for me, I always have trouble seeing what patterns and things are. I always have to study the past to see the patterns. So I think that was actually really cool you mentioned that, though. I didn't think about at all how NI can work with SE to see those patterns and things that are in place. I always find that fascinating how the two quote unquote opposite functions work together. I always think that's really cool. I had not thought about that at all, how NI could help you out about that.
Yeah, because it's interesting how the perceiving functions tend to work together if they're in the the second and third positions. Whereas with you, your perceiving functions are like way far apart. You've got the
Yeah, yeah,
very SI with your NEs way down there.
yeah,
So you might not necessarily use those two functions together. But but yeah, you're using SI plus TI. But yeah, that really makes sense about gathering detailed facts. Because like I was saying, I use TI to gather facts and just basically organize them in my head. Like I know I'm generally good at memorizing dates. Like I can remember dates that certain things happened in my life, even if I have no practical purpose for remembering it.
mm.
Like like every year, um, on a certain date, like say February 23rd, I'll remember. Oh yeah, this is the 15th anniversary that this one event happened,
Oh, cool.
and I'll like post it to Facebook, and then the people will respond like, "Oh, you think too much."
Yeah.
Um, but
Oh,
I mean,
okay, go ahead.
oh no, I was go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, it's interesting too because I do the same thing, and I have no idea how this relates to type. I just think it's interesting. I've always felt like it kind of relates to at least my SI a little bit. I do that with like personal things though. I do that with like personal traditions. Like I'll remember that 5 years ago, not on this date, but in this month or this kind of first week of July or whatever, I did this kind of thing. I did this particular thing. Or I like traditions. I like little traditions of things, not even like holidays necessarily, but I do watch a lot of sports. Like it's always a tradition of mine to watch certain sporting things at a particular time, and I'd hate it if I missed it. So it's interesting. I think it's really cool to hear how different types do that in similar and different ways. That was interesting how you mentioned that. How you like to remember the dates. That's really neat.
Yeah, that's so the thing. Yeah, traditions. That's more of an SJ stereotype. But the thing is,
Yeah.
I kind of do that too in my own way. Like I'll do things like I once had this tradition of eating at this one particular restaurant every February 14th. I don't call it Valentine's Day. I call it February 14th. Um, and it wasn't intentional at first. It was just something where I just happened to wind up eating there again like the very next year. And I go, oh yeah, I did this again last year. I should do it again next year. And it just kind of became this tradition until that restaurant closed down.
Ah.
But I mean, yeah, I do I do little things like that just kind of for fun. Just to kind of because I think for me it's just because I enjoy the pattern.
Yeah.
So I don't know, if it's the same for you, like just
Well, see, that's one thing I'd like to ask other people about that because it's always hard to tell. Like, and this is true for anything with the type is just how many things are true just for like all humans or most humans, and how many things like can you really break down into type? And that's always confusing for me because like I don't know how much of that is just general human nostalgia. And how much of it is it's like you said, it's a stereotype that SJs like traditions. Well, obviously not all SJs are going to love traditions, and all non-SJs will be like, "Oh, traditions are stupid." But I do think there might be some general patterns that are true with certain types. But I don't know. It's a really interesting thing to think about.